Must have only been about 3 or 4 weeks ago I discovered a field of science or philosophy called semiotics, and I'm talking of Charles Sanders Peirce. Um, his semiotics, which was basically his logic, but for him, logic wasn't uh, the rules handed down from some transcendental mathematical world. Rather, logic is about communication, meaningful communication. So the laws of semiosis are the conventions of language, though language in an extended sense, not just human um, phonetic symbols and you know pictures, but um, also natural signals, natural signs found in the non-human biological and perhaps physical world, or material, strictly non-biological matter. Um, and so this approach is interesting because normally, a scientist is trained to be objective, which means basically, as a scientist, you can't let your feelings for the phenomenon affect your observation of the phenomenon. And this is interesting because in physics, when dealing with the strictly material world, this seems to work reasonably well. We can know and understand and reveal a lot of the underlying rules and laws and habits of the way matter moves through space and time. But when we apply this attitude to the biological world, where it's obvious that there is teleology present, in the sense of meaning and purpose, in organisms strive for something. And granted, empirically, this is merely a behavior, and in the typical understanding of logic, observing that behavior doesn't necessarily imply that there is consciousness within. It could just be a zombie, a machine, a physical or physiochemical process designed by natural selection under variation, or variation under natural selection. And that variation is just random genetic, really copyings that either are not helpful to the organism and so kill off that particular mutation, or happen to benefit in some way and then help that organism adapt to its environment. But this approach to understanding biology that is based on that typical objective scientific stance, it tends to deny that life has meaning. And certainly it doesn't necessarily or explicitly make claims about the nature of human life. But if humans are animals, which of course they are, and the rest of the animal, plant, fungi, protist, microbial world does not have purpose, then by definition, that scientific claim is negating the scientist's own position of objectivity. It's almost a self-contradictory statement, or at least self-referential, for a scientist to say the biological world is completely free of any teleological motivations. It merely goes on, towards going on, because those are the laws of physics as they have occurred on this planet. And certainly this seems true, but what are the laws of physics? Are they really these logical mathematical formulas given from high above? We just assume, well, this is the way that those laws, gravity, the cosmological constant, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, quantum mechanics, all of these equations we've developed to measure the world, reality, at different scales, we assume they're just there because that's the way it is. They're transcendental, and we just find them, and they are objective. We didn't create them; we just discover them. But are there really laws? Don't they evolve? Aren't they more like habits? And if the Big Bang cosmology is true, then of course that's exactly what they are. The laws of physics, a few seconds after the Big Bang were nothing like what they are today. And what the laws of physics are like today may have nothing to do with what they're like a couple billion years from now. And so laws are more like habits, and once we make that shift, we have to start wondering, if we're going to understand these habits at least, whether or not they have a direction, or a purpose, a meaning. And I think it's obvious that they do. For evolution to occur, there must be memory of some kind, otherwise the organism never gains an ability to predict the future, and so does not survive. And the strictly, materialistic, reductionistic view of biology would say that that memory is the genetic code, and that it contains information. But can we really understand information in this disembodied way? I mean, this is why I'm always arguing that DNA of itself doesn't do anything. It requires an egg to mature, to have the necessary proteins, histones, ribosomes, and such to reproduce itself. It doesn't reproduce itself. It reproduces itself with the help of cellular machinery, and that's crucial. Neo-Darwinism tells us a lot about the DNA itself and how its patterns correlate with the patterns we find in, phylogenetic history and the history of biological lineages. It can give us a way of understanding how this occurs, but it more tells us why certain forms go extinct than it tells us why certain forms continue to exist. In other words, Neo-Darwinism tells us nothing about morphology. It tells us nothing about consciousness, of the organism's living ability to recognize meaning in its world and form memory that's not contained in the DNA but can still be shared and communicated and therefore passed along. Neo-Darwinism doesn't consider this. It does consider it in humans, but somehow, for some reason, takes it away from the natural world, from the body. It's purely mental quality that human beings possess because, our language is magical somehow. This is still a form of Cartesianism, which is the mind-body dualism. And while many modern materialists may say there's no such thing as mind as this separate substance that drives the body around, they still accept Descartes' mechanistic understanding of matter, and in so doing negate their own ability to say so.